We have to be really careful, again, about the influence that other people have on the way that we think about our own business. I always say, go back to the way that you want to work with your clients. What matters to you? What can you do with what you have that makes that as simple and as easy as possible when it comes to pricing?
Welcome to Entrepreneur Money Stories.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Danielle.
Yeah, this is going to be a great episode. Really excited to have you here. Tell the audience not just a little bit about yourself and how you got to this space, but maybe something that you've never shared or what most people don't know about you.
Oh, okay. This is funny. Okay. So right now I live in the US. And as you can probably tell from my accent, this is not where I grew up. But where I did grow up was in a small country in the UK called Wales, which a lot of folks haven't heard of or may not be aware of, is its own country. And not only is Wales its own country, it also has its own language. And so where I grew up, everybody spoke Welsh. And with the school that I went to was a Welsh language school. So I did all of my education up until the age of 18 through Welsh. Now I spoke English at home with my family and most of my friends. But all of my education was through Welsh, which means that a lot of the things that you probably take for granted and know, I know through the Welsh language and sometimes not through the English language, which is kind of an interesting thing. So it creates these interesting connections in the brain for me. But yeah,
you're challenged in you're using all brain capacity and just the common conversation.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So science and religious education and history was all through Welsh. And in Wales, we've got, there's Welsh is its own language. We have names that are Welsh. We have different phrases we use in Welsh. So yeah, that's where I came from. And, after that, I actually moved to London and worked in London for a long time in finance and marketing. So it was a very different world.
So was it intentional that your family spoke English at home?
My mother was English. She grew up in London, so that it was natural to speak English at home. My family from all over the UK and ended up settling in Wales. Many families spoke Welsh at home as well, and so it's interesting to see how that kind of develops into other parts of where you kind of tend to go in life. Right, when you grow up in a bilingual household, and what that means for other learning opportunities. So,
wow. Well, thank you very, very much for sharing that. I appreciate it. Well, we have so much to dive in and talk about today. Now, your experience today is working with boutique fitness studios. What made you fall in love and want to work within this niche?
So my career started out, like I said, in London, and I worked in very intense finance banking world where I worked really long hours. But I'd also already was also very movement focused. So I was a runner. I was very active, and I was introduced to Pilates during the course of my sort of early part of my career in finance, where I was working 14, 15-hour days. And it was a completely different pace of movement than I was used to. I was used to running and doing like intense everything. Everything was intense in my world. And then I started doing Pilates, and Pilates is its own type of intensity, but
it can be intense. But you're right, it's very different intense.
But in a very different way. It connected me more to how I was feeling in my body and all of that. And so I kind of got hooked on Pilates. At that time, I was actually working in New York City. It was 2006, 2007. And I was starting to get burnt out in my working environment, my working career, and wondering like how the rest of my career was going to look and what I wanted to do. And I decided that I kind of needed to take some time out of that world, the intense world. And I was just like, I just really want to go and lean into Pilates. And I want to go, I don't know if I want to teach it forever. I don't know if that's what I want to do, but I want to go and spend more time doing that because I had fallen head over heels in love with it. And so like a lot of folks who before me and have since then, we fall in love with the movement, and the more we do it, the more we love it. And so, I am a big movement person, and I fell in love with Pilates. And so I would pursue a teacher training program in Pilates. And beyond that, as I was having conversations with my fellow teachers in that program, and after I completed my training program, and as I was working at other studios around New York City and then back in London, I found that I was really drawn back into that business side of things. And a lot of my peers came to me asking me about what I thought about how to price Pilates sessions and how to price their classes and how to market their studio and get more people in. And it just was something, that came very naturally to me, and that was just as easy for me to be able to offer guidance and advice and strategies that worked. And then people kept coming back and asking for me to be more involved in their businesses. And so I very organically moved from teaching Pilates and having a studio to supporting other studio owners with growing and building their businesses, which I've been doing now since 2013.
Wow. Okay. So about 10 years now.
Yeah.
Long time. It's great. I love how you were able to weave both career paths into one to find how that would best suit who you are today.
It was not by any sort of plan ahead of time, but sometimes, sometimes you have to kind of follow your gut, and when I moved from the corporate world, that was very terrifying for me at the time, but I kind of leaned into it. And it's so funny because, I used to take the subway in New York to and from the studio where I worked and did my training. And recently I came across a little notebook that I had written down on I remember going back and forth on that subway, writing down ideas for the studio that I that I might want to open and what that might look like and workshops I might want to do and the way that I might want to work with my clients and how I would market it and names and things like that. And there was also in there, I had just written down all these ideas for how to consult with other studio owners and how to help them as well. And I kind of came across this book recently, and it's kind of funny how it's kind of, I probably wrote those notes in like 2009, 2010, and I came across it and it was like, oh my gosh, yes, maybe there is something. Yeah. Maybe there was something there all along and I just didn't realize.
Yeah. Well, gosh, thinking 10 years ago, that was really kind of the beginning of boutique fitness studios. I know that has become something that we know very well. I know, growing up, I remember going to the rec center. That was like where we all went to work out, was our community center. And now it's very common to have a boutique fitness studio on every corner, but they've definitely gained popularity. So when you work with your clients, and I think that this can go for every business, but especially in this area where we've grown in so much competition, how do you guide your clients in differentiating their branding and their messaging?
As we all know, and if you're into any sort of fitness at all, you're absolutely right. Boutique fitness has grown tremendously over the course of the last 10 years. And we've seen, back in 2010, it was the odd yoga studio. It was a couple of bar studios. It was a handful of Pilates studios. And then it was the big box gyms. And over the course of the last 10 years, we've seen huge numbers of boutique fitness franchises develop and grow and expand enormously. We've seen, obviously, the pivot to being in an online space, and just a tremendous amount of opportunity has come with that increased number of offerings from various different outlets. And so what that has actually done for the industry has been to raise awareness for boutique fitness as a whole. And so these days, when we look at the consumer, the people who are on the other side of the studios who are coming as clients, as customers, they're often now members of multiple different boutique fitness studios. They may go to one studio for yoga and another studio for strength. 10 years ago, that would not have been the case. So with this increased competition, what we've seen is an adjustment in consumer behavior as well. So that means that with that increased competition, and although we know that sometimes our consumers also have multiple studios that they visit for different types of offerings, we still have that incredible amount of competition. And we'll see studios open, next door to each other oftentimes, which is obviously creates a lot of angst for those studio owners, perhaps wondering how they will retain their existing clients and continue to bring new clients in the door. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make in those situations is using price as a tool to differentiate themselves, right? I'm sure you might be familiar with that, being in the numbers world, right? And when I work with my studio owners, we talk a lot about pricing. We talk a lot about numbers. But one of the things that I think is absolutely critical for all small business owners is to really truly understand what makes them unique and different. And sometimes as a business owner, you're so in the weeds of running your own business, you don't even see the things that you're doing that make you special and unique. But if you're able to take time to be aware of what that looks like. And so when I work with my studio owners, we go through a series of exercises where we look at different parts of their customer experience, what they care about, the values they have, how they take care of their clients, how they help them get the outcomes and the results and achievements that they're looking for. We very, very quickly realize, there is a lot there to use that helps you to separate yourself from the competition and stand out from the crowd.
So for someone who's listening, who is having a difficult time differentiating themselves in their brand messaging, best case solution would be to come and work with you and your team and dig completely into uncovering those strengths. But in order to be able to take some type of action today, right? Would this be a good exercise for them to do, is just to kind of take a blank sheet of paper and start writing through their customer journey, what the journey is like coming in the door, what's important to ensure that that customer has the best experience within that facility. And then if we don't have core values, think about what are the values to you personally as the CEO and business owner that tie into the customer journey and what they're experiencing, to be able to start to pull out what really makes you unique to someone, right?
Yes, I think that is exactly, that's a great exercise. And I'll add to that, and I'll say that often when we're doing this exercise, the tendency is to then immediately compare what we are doing or what you're doing to your competitor. And that is incredibly detrimental, because far too often we overlook those things that make you unique and special because we assume that other people are also doing those things. And the reality is often they are not. And so if you do this exercise, I encourage you to think about it as though your business is in a vacuum, as though you have zero competitors, as though no one's ever done this before, ever.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because it's like nowhere in there did either one of us say, what is the guy next door doing? Or what is the gal next door doing? Right? Like neither one of us said that. We said, what are you doing? What is your business doing? What are your core values? So I'm so glad that you said that, because it's almost like you have to put on your blinders, sunglasses, and really focus on yourself and not like anything that's outside.
Yeah,
I said that.
So I did this exercise with a Pilates studio owner many years ago. And it was funny because this is actually one of the Pilates studios that I had gone to quite a lot. And you can imagine in my world, I've been to a lot of different boutique fitness studios all over the world and had a lot of experiences, both good and bad. And so I was doing this exercise with this studio owner, and I was very aware of how the experience that she gave into her clients in her studio. And so, I was there talking to her, and I said, so tell me about what you care about when it comes to the way your clients feel when they walk in the studio. And she said, I really want my clients to feel comfortable, and I want them to feel welcome, and I want them to feel safe. And I was like, fantastic, great. I said, what do you do to make that happen? And she said, okay, well, we always welcome our clients. We know their first names. We always welcome them at the door. I always make sure someone is welcoming the clients who are walking in the door every single day and smile at them and take them into their sessions or guide them. And there's someone there to create that welcoming, friendly experience the minute they walk in the studio. Okay. And I said to her, this is amazing. This is exactly what we need to share with your clients or customers who are about to take that next step, but might be concerned or held back because they're not sure about what to expect, right? We need to share that with them, that you are going to be there to welcome them in the door. And she said to me, well, why? She said, doesn't every studio do that? And I said, no. I said, absolutely not. Not every studio does that. A lot of studios you'll walk into and no one is there to greet you. Or a lot of studios you'll walk into and someone is there, but they don't say hello to you. And that is a really important component of removing those hesitations that often people have in that customer journey to help them feel like they're making the right decision by becoming your client. And so I just wanted to share that with you because it's a story that sort of indicates how easy it is to overlook some of the things that you might do and take for granted in your business, but that actually is one of the things that helps you to stand out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, because it it lends to one other point that I don't think that you even intended. It also can help you in your decision making and how you spend money in your business. So if you know that this is something that's really important to you in your customer journey, when you go to decide on your spending plan for the year for your budget. I'm going to use air quotes because that's a corporate word and I hate it. But when you think about your spending plan and how you're going to meet your goals, it's really important that you include the cost of desk staff so that you have the personnel there to greet each person and to help you maintain that core value. I can't tell you how many of our clients don't know how to use their core values or their customer journey in order to guide their spending. And so somebody might say, well, my goal is to be as profitable as possible. And so I can't spend money on having support staff. But if that support staff is a key element to your customer journey, then it's really important that supports our profitability or that we increase prices so that we can support that.
Right. And there's an impact long term, I'm sure, on the success, in that particular example, and the success of a boutique fitness studio, to have someone who is welcoming a client for the first time into the studio. That client is far more likely to come back a second time and a third time and keep coming back and also refer their friends. And so it's not just an expense, actually. It's to some degree, it's an investment in that customer experience, which in my kind of world, in the boutique fitness world, where it's a long-term relationship kind of business, we want people to come back and spend over a long period of time, over and over again. That is an investment in that retention side of the business and kind of an important part of it as well. But it all does align with your values, right? Building a business that isn't aligned with your values is always going to create kind of friction.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about the difference in your branding and messaging in regards to how you get somebody into the door and then how you keep somebody coming back into the door. So new clients experience versus retention. How does our branding, how does our messaging, what changes in that?
We kind of umbrella, use the term marketing, but actually there's two kind of distinct buckets when it comes to marketing. One is getting clients in the door, and the second is keeping clients. And the messaging and what you tell them about your business is different because of the experience they've had, right? And so when you think about the clients that haven't visited your studio yet or haven't interacted with you yet, but are looking or are considering becoming your client, then we need to address and understand what might be holding them back, what hesitations they might have. And we also need to understand perhaps other experiences that they might have had that might influence or impact their decision to work with you or become your client. And it's really important in our messaging to acknowledge those hesitations early on and address them in order to then invite them to that next step, to keep them more curious, to get them more interested, and to share that little bit more information that's going to get them to click that buy button, to click that book now button or schedule here button, right? That messaging is really important. And in that messaging, you also want to share a little bit about who you are and why you care about the certain things that you care about. And you have to talk about that early on in that customer journey because you want to pre-qualify them a little bit before they come in to make sure that they're going to be a good fit for you. So to give you a quick example, if, we always, in boutique fitness and in fitness in general, everyone says, well, and when I ask people, who are your clients? Who do you really want to work with, right? Studio owners, 90% of the time will say, oh, everybody should be moving their bodies. Everybody should be taking yoga or everybody should be taking bar. Everybody could be my client, right? But the reality is that if you are a bar studio, for example, then you're probably not going to have a client who is really excited about CrossFit be your client, right? It's often a different type of clientele with a different level of interest. And so we want to be thoughtful about who we are bringing in, because if you're trying to attract people who are interested in doing really intense, heavy weight workouts into your bar studio, then you're going to be reaching the wrong kind of people. And they're going to come in and be disappointed. It's going to leave you feeling flat and frustrated. You're going to waste your time, energy, and money on trying to get them to keep coming back. They're just not a qualified client. And so we want to be really clear about the environment that you have and who it's great for and why it's a great fit for those people. And that all happens before they even walk in the door. Then once they come in, that's when we're focused on retention, right? And we want to make sure that we are affirming to them that they're in the right place, again, for the thing that you very specifically do and can help them to achieve. And that is where that shift comes from into perhaps less so addressing the hesitations before they come in and showing them what's possible for them when they're your client. And so you do that inside of the studio in the conversations you're having, but throughout that customer journey, you're using social media to influence the way that people perceive what you do, but also in the emails you might send to clients, you want to be very consistent with your messaging around what makes you unique and stand out. Those two buckets, they're both important.
Thank you for clarifying that, because you're right. We hear clients talk about marketing in a very general sense, and there's almost, would you agree with the statement that it's more like sales and then marketing, right? Like sales is more building a brand or marketing is more like building a brand and sales is more bringing in the door?
Yeah, the way that I think about it is there's marketing and visibility, and then they show up and there's a moment where it's sales.
Okay. All right.
Right. And then there's more marketing. And sales and marketing are interactive, but the sales to me is the transaction.
Yeah.
And if you've done that front end marketing, that top of the funnel market, that visibility and awareness part of the marketing funnel really effectively, then that sale part is not a pushy, high pressure kind of moment. It's a next step and just a continuation through that customer journey. And then, you have your build, like in my world, you're building relationships with clients. And so you're not having this sort of like, will they, won't they binary moment of yes or no. It's well, if you want to continue on, here's what's going to happen next. And this is what is possible for you. And this is what we recommend. And all of a sudden, it's just a guidance into the next phase.
Today's show is brought to you by Kickstart Accounting, Inc. Are you ready to take control of your finances and pave the way to sustainable profit? Look no further than Kickstart Accounting, Inc., your trusted bookkeeping service since 2015. They've worked with thousands of other business owners, so they understand your unique needs. What really actually sets them apart, though, is that they're entrepreneurs themselves, dedicated to entrepreneurs like you. Kickstart Accounting Inc.'s strategic framework empowers you every step of the way. They will start with their safe and secure onboarding process, use their magic to set up QuickBooks, and provide you with their easy-to-read financial snapshot. Don't forget, you'll have a dedicated team to ensure that your financials are accurate and on time. Don't let bookkeeping overwhelm you. Trust the Kickstart Accounting Inc. team today. Visit kickstartaccountinginc.com to book your discovery call and get started.
You mentioned pricing a little bit, that we don't want to use pricing to differentiate ourselves against our competitors. But what about using pricing in that moment, that moment in sales to help that individual over that hurdle? What is your stance with your clients in terms of pricing and discounts?
Well, first of all, I think I kind of have to prerequisite this with, I think it's critical to have a pricing model that is aligned with your values and the way that you want to work with your clients. And depending on your business, sometimes we sort of inherit or copy other people's pricing models. So maybe that's one-off drop-in classes, or maybe that's a subscription, or maybe that's packages, or maybe it's a combination of something else. And having worked in all the studios that I've worked in, every single studio and every single business is unique in the way that it wants to work with their clients and has unique talents and resources. Some people are great at lead generation. Some people are great at retention. And so you want to make sure that you're building a business that is aligned with your brand and your brand values. And that includes the way you're pricing your services. So it has to be aligned with the way that you want to work with your clients and what's going to help them get the best outcomes.
You give an example of that. I'm thinking smaller, tight-knit classes versus packed classes that are very, very crowded. But am I thinking that in the right way?
Yeah. So there's a few different pricing models that we see and structures. And what's interesting is that we often, as business owners, have these ideas or beliefs that a certain way is better than another way. And we often, what I've observed is that studio owners will often ignore what they feel is the right thing to do because someone has told them that something has worked for someone else and that's the best way to do something, right? So it might be that, having classes with 10 people in is the best way to do something, or having packages is the best way to do something, or having no packages are the best way, right? And when it comes to just sort of making sure that your business is rock solid, I think that as the business owner, you have to stand behind your pricing, which means you also have to stand behind your pricing model. And what I mean by that is, if you truly believe that a customer should not be tied to any class, studio, or teacher, then drop-ins are great. Just do drop-ins. If you truly believe that your clients need to come twice a week to get results, and that's how often you want to work with your clients, then you should offer a subscription that facilitates them to come twice a week, right? And when you build your business around what most is the way that you want to work with your clients and what you believe, then you have a pricing model that reflects that. You have a business model that reflects that. You hire people into that, and so it all aligns with the way that you want to work with your clients. What I see often is that I'll give you a perfect example. So last week I was speaking to a studio owner. She has her own studio. She has one or two other teachers, but predominantly she's the owner operator, but she is the lead teacher. So she's teaching every single day, every single of the week. She wanted to offer memberships to her clients. So she works one-on-one with her clients. This is not a class-based situation at all. This is just one-on-one sessions. She wanted to offer memberships. But the problem is that which works for some studios, but she was struggling with it because she didn't have the capacity to be able to move people around. So when you sell someone a membership for a one-on-one Pilates studio and they can't make their one session, you kind of have to fit them in somewhere else because they've already paid for their, say, 4 sessions that month or 8 sessions that month. And so if there's nowhere else to put them in your schedule because you're fully booked, then you can't really sell a membership type structure to a client in good faith, really, right? And I don't recommend it. Mm-hmm. So it didn't make sense for her business model. The pricing model and the business model didn't align, right? Now, if she had 5 other teachers and she had more capacity, then it would be much easier to do. And there's ways around it. You can offer refunds and all those good things, but it's not a seamless kind of easy way to facilitate the way that you want to work with clients. And so she had this idea in her head that she should have memberships because someone else had memberships and they said it was great. So now she wanted memberships and she thought it was going to be great, but it doesn't always fit, right? Yeah. And I think we have to be really careful again about the influence that other people have on the way that we think about our own business. And I always say, go back to the way that you want to work with your clients. What matters to you and what can you do with what you have that makes that as simple and as easy as possible when it comes to pricing. So I think having that business model is really important, first of all. And then, then you can think about sort of using discounts and so on to incentivize people, which can make a lot of sense.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a really great example. I want to tie in kind of the financial component to that, right? Because what you're saying is a beautiful way of tying it back to business model and your core values. And I think you would agree with this, that we can't forget about all the expenses that tie into running a business. So if we're in an area that is, that we have to pay a large amount in our rent or mortgage fees for our space. Maybe the utilities are high. The price of our teachers is high. So maybe you want to have individuals who work for you and work for you only. So you don't want them to have another position outside of your company. Maybe you don't want them teaching for other studios. So you have to pay them more in order to be able to facilitate that part of the business model. Keeping in mind our front desk example, what we were talking about earlier, making sure that we have the staffing in place to support those core values. We can't forget about just pricing for the business model and core values, but actually looking at how much money does it cost us to run this business on average, right? Like find out what is that per month on average. And then a very simple calculation, because I think that we get really in the weeds with how many people per class, how many classes, all right, of these teachers, how many classes can they teach? Run some averages, right? Like this can be a very simple calculation of what is your capacity per class and an average attendance? What is the number of classes per week that with that current teacher staffing that you can support, and divide that by the total amount of expenses? Does that pricing even come close? Because if not, we have a bigger profitability problem. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I would say it's not just common that those calculations are overlooked. I think it's more often than not that I'll work with a studio owner and we'll look at these numbers, and we haven't optimized the pricing for the business model and for profit, and have again perhaps looked too often at what other people are doing in terms of pricing, but also in terms of compensation to guide decisions that may or may not be the right thing for your business. And so yes, understanding how your pricing influences your profit is critical, and being able to look at those numbers and understand what the difference is if you increase, say, your capacity by 2 people per class. What's the impact of adding 2 people per class to your to the schedule? Or what's the impact of increasing the price by $2 or $3 a class? And where do you have? There's these different levers you have available to you to increase your profitability or to increase your revenue as well. And which one is going to be the one that makes the most sense to pull? And so it's really important to look at those numbers and to understand that and what makes sense for you and your business, for sure.
I know one of your kind of specialties is to help business owners build a profitable studio that runs like clockwork. What does that mean?
So glad you asked. Like I said, I just mentioned that we have a lot of tools at our fingertips, a lot of levers that we can pull in our business. And I think that running a business is a bit like putting together a puzzle. There's a lot of different pieces. When they don't fit together, it doesn't look right. It doesn't work properly. But when all these pieces of the puzzle fit together really nicely, then you've got what I think is sort of the ultimate, which is a profitable business that runs like clockwork, which is when it doesn't give you a bunch of headaches, it's not super stressful, it doesn't drain you as the owner. And all too often, you're a business owner that's wearing a lot of different hats. You're doing a lot of things that perhaps you might not feel like you're very good at. You might be doing a lot of things that you wish you weren't doing. And I think that there is a place you can get to where it does run very seamlessly, but only when you've got certain systems in place. And so those systems are those systems that bring in new clients. So that what we call what we talked about earlier in that top end, before the sale marketing, it's the systems that retain your clients. So it's the activities you're doing to keep clients active in your business and spending in your business and engage in your business and ultimately becoming these amazing champions of your business. And then it's behind the scenes of how you're creating systems and processes that make everything that you do in your business run really, really smoothly. And so that includes things like managing a team and hiring effectively and onboarding people. It can include how you set up your booking systems and software. It includes how you track your numbers and how often you look at them and what system you have for making sure that you check in on those numbers on a regular basis. And I think what we tend to do is we tend to focus on the things that we enjoy or that we're good at. So a lot of my studio owners who love to teach will often their kind of specialty is in that retention part of those sort of 3 pillars, where they're really good at working closely with their clients. They know everyone's name. They know what's happening in their lives, but they often have a hard time with getting new clients in or with, developing those processes that make things run smoothly. When I work with my studio owners is I work on all 3 of those pillars, but not sort of all together or all at once, or giving them sort of one thing to go away and do and come back to. Is that we're consistently looking at ways we can up level across all of those 3 pillars, not just once in the year, but multiple times throughout the year, depending on what's happening in their business. And so it's not about focusing on one thing. It's actually more about consistently focusing across all of those areas.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down, because I think that's unique in the industry. However, it can also be applied to all business owners, right? Because we all have leads coming in the door, retaining our clients, and every single one of our clients, they all have a kind of zone of genius, the thing that they really enjoy doing in their business. And then it's important to understand what are the other pieces. And then are we going to hire help? Are we going to look to outsource? Are we going to get support? Are we going to learn how to do it ourselves? So thank you for breaking that down and giving kind of food for thought for anyone who's listening to think, what is it that I'm good at and I want to do? And then how do I want to get support in the other areas of my business?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's kind of hard to know what might be missing, and having an extra set of eyes or having someone outside of your business talk you through what that might look like can be helpful. And I think sometimes the other thing I'll see often with the business owners that I work with is that the things that they don't like to do, they think no one else wants to do either. And so they do them because they don't want to delegate it, because they are like, oh, but this is so I don't want to make anyone else do this. This is terrible. Who else would ever care about wanting to do it? Who else would want to do this? And the reality is that actually, no, like there's a lot of people out there that will happily do the things that you don't want to do in your business. So, you have to getting help, and delegating is really, really important to growth.
Yeah. AKA bookkeeping.
Right. It's exactly prime example.
Yeah. Longtime listeners have heard me say, I always believed that there was a triangle of people that you needed on your team. And I've recently said, let's throw out the triangle and we really need a square, right? We need to have on our team a bookkeeper, a tax accountant, a financial advisor, and a coach. And that coach is a component that we cannot skip in terms of our team that's going to set the business owner up for success. The business owner, they have to have bookkeeping in order to work with you as a coach. They have to have bookkeeping in place because they have to have the numbers you're going to ask them about what they can afford to implement, what they can't, and how to use it for profitability. So we have to have bookkeeping in order to successfully work with our coach. And a lot of times business owners will look to one of those team members to get to the other pieces of the information. So they might be asking their coach like, hey, can you just help me update this QuickBooks? Or can you just, can you just tell me where I should build my retirement? Or how do I build wealth? Or, what do you think is a tax write-off? Rather than saying, that's not your expertise. I have to have all 4 team members in order for the CEO to be set up for success. Would you agree with all of that?
Yes. Those 4 kind of roles are unique and different enough that there is not, there is a little overlap. I might know something about bookkeeping. I might know something about tax accounting, but it's not my specialty at all. And I absolutely always refer my studio owners out to those people who I know, like, and trust, who I think they will also enjoy working with as well. And I think that having that network is really important.
How do you personally keep your money mindset strong? And when you're working with your clients who are implementing change, how do you suggest that they keep their money mindset strong?
For myself personally, I think, as a coach over the years, I think having awareness for how our thoughts around money can influence our business decisions, and seeing it firsthand with the business owners that I work with. I see money in business as a tool, not as a driver of my worth or my impact. It is a tool. It's a number, but it means nothing to me emotionally. Does that make sense? So I don't put my worth or my impact or my value on my revenue or my profit. It is a number. I like to measure it. I like it to go up. It makes, that is a good thing to see, but I don't walk away at the end of the day and think, oh my goodness, this is bad. And I had a terrible day because of anything to do with what my numbers
Just because I'm not profitable, just because my business isn't profitable, doesn't mean I'm not worthy of care, love, XYZ.
100%. I don't know how that is developed personally, but that is where I come from. And I think that I also am very conscious about deciding what my measure of success is, right? And so for me, my measure of success is how many people I get to support in the programs that I offer. And the way that those engagements go and the impact that I see the work that my studio owners doing because of the work that we have done together impact their businesses, right? That's my measure of success. And so to me, that has a priority over other numbers in my business. And for the studio owners that I work with, I kind of encourage them to do the same thing. So we do a lot of goal setting in terms of not revenue goals. We do goal setting in terms of what does success look like to you in your business? Because success doesn't just look like a number in the bank, success could also look like taking time off and not losing money. It could look like taking a trip to Mexico with my family, right? It could look like hiring a teacher. It could look like running a continuing education workshop or going on a retreat, right? And those are all goals that people have that will help them to feel like they have achieved or been successful in their businesses. And so I encourage the studio owners that I work with to think about the success on those terms. Obviously, optimizing profitability is critical and not to be overlooked. And it's not to say that that doesn't matter, because it does. But let's also add to that the influence you can have over your own success when you're clear about the goals that you set for yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet today that you wish I would have?
No, I mean, I just want to say that I think that when it comes to running a business, you wear a lot of hats. One of the areas where we often we're not educated enough, or it's hard to get the education that we need, is when it comes to numbers. And the more you can lean into perhaps what might be very uncomfortable around talking about money, looking at your numbers, understanding your numbers, as much as it might be the last thing you ever want to do, if you take the time to do that, it will 100% impact positively on the bottom line of your business, without question. Every single time I worked with a studio owner and we have just ripped off that Band-Aid and said, okay, let's take a look at these numbers. Let's sit down and work through your profitability calculator. Let's look at those, how that all looks in your business, and understand those different levers you can pull. The impact that has on how they run their business, the decisions they make in their business, and how profitable and successful they are from a revenue perspective is incredible. And so I want to, speak to Danielle about your numbers.
I know we
lean into it.
we speak the same language, but I think as studio owners, there's something that unique there. I think all of us can agree. If you're a student, right? If one of your students came into your studio and they were having a hard time in the class, would you say, "There's the door. I think you should leave"? Right? You wouldn't say that just because they're uncomfortable or they're working hard. You would say, okay, this is what it is, where you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's where the growth happens. So I think it's easy for us to say that to students as they're participating in our class, but we almost need to put that same student hat on as business owners, that it's okay to be uncomfortable. And we have to do it anyway.
And sometimes it's the things that you're most uncomfortable doing are the things that you most need to do, which is kind of annoying, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Where can the audience learn more about you and stay in touch?
Absolutely. You can go to my website at spring3.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Seran_spring_3.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.